Adam, really good to see you here at Motorsport Days Live.
Nice to see you again.
So let's talk a little bit about how it all began for you. Now, you and I are very similar in that our first experiences of being competitive in motorsport started on a games console. So
yes.
Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I've played Gran Turismo since I was a kid, you know, on the PlayStation 1. Got into competitively when GT Academy was launched, which was a competition to get sim racing drivers into a real racing car. And that was about 9 years ago now, so I've been doing it for pretty much 9 years non-stop.
So obviously we talk about esports as a new form of motor racing, and it is the fastest growing industry within the sport.
Yeah.
When you consider that you started racing on your sofa, essentially, and now you're going around the world to compete in these events, I mean, can you still believe it's actually happening? Is this something that you have got used to now?
I've definitely not got used to it. It's just so crazy thinking I was, you know, in my bedroom with, I had an IKEA chair, wardrobe on its side with a hole cut out at the back for the pedals to go through, you know, competing against people around the world, setting times to get me top in Europe, top in the UK. And now I'm traveling around the world to all these world tours, battling against the same people I've been racing against for years. So actually to meet all these drivers in person, it's fantastic. I think that's the best part of sim racing, actually seeing people in real life and you know, competing against them next to each other, rather than just online.
So for those who are still learning about the esports community, I mean, there are so many schools of thought as to which simulator is the best one to start with, which console you should have, which platform you should have. There are so many different schools of thought. From the point of view of someone who started on a games console in the living room and is now a professional esports driver, what should people be looking out for when they're trying to make their step into esports from a professional perspective? What should people be looking for?
It comes down to personal taste, I think. It's much easier to get into a games console than it is a gaming PC because you can spend thousands on a gaming PC. Some people already have a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox, so picking up a set of Corsa or Project Cars, you can get on either console, I believe. Gran Turismo is obviously on the PlayStation, and you've got Forza on the Xbox. It's as simple as buying a copy of the game, getting the console, and having a good crack at it. And if you, at least with Gran Turismo, you can enter the sport mode there through the game, and if you get good enough and you set quick enough times, you get matched against quicker people, and eventually you'll end up at these events which I go to. It's literally as easy as that, and that's the great thing about it. It's so accessible to the masses.
I mean, it's incredible when you think that the most recent competitions from Gran Turismo Sport, some of the live streams that they're putting out has about 50% the figures of Formula One at sometimes at their peak, which is astonishing when you consider that people are watching, inverted commas, a video game. But we've gone far beyond a video game now. Yeah,
and if you look at the production that Gran Turismo put in for these events, it's like watching a real TV show. You know, it's something you could see on a TV channel. It's absolutely crazy. Some of the numbers, like you say, are really impressive. I think last year we were touching some Formula E races, views, which again is a bit mind-boggling.
Now, obviously there are lots of different forms of motorsport out there, and there are lots of different disciplines within esports. But because obviously it's virtual, I assume that being able to transfer skills from one discipline of motorsport to another is far easier in the esports world than it would be in real life, but I guess it does come with its own challenges.
Yeah, you know, games are getting better and better to replicate real life physics, so you can really feel oversteer, understeer, and all these things you'd experience in a real racing car in a game now, especially if you buy a gaming peripheral wheel, which you can get, you can spend thousands on them, but the main thing is that it replicates real life experiences and physics. Gran Turismo is getting closer and closer to some of the big racing sims, you know, like iRacing, Assetto Corsa, Project Cars. But underneath all of them, they're all trying to replicate real life, and it's getting to the point where you can practice in a game on a, say Silverstone, and come to the track, and actually, all the braking points are very similar turning points, and Formula One drivers do it before they come to a race weekend. They're practicing at the simulator at the factory, and it's because the simulators can actually replicate real life really well now. So.
And of course, when qualifying gets rained off in Japan, they just fire up the PlayStation and get on the F1 game as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Now that's another side of it that's been really fascinating to observe over the last 36 months. We've suddenly seen that the F1 game that people can play in their living room to emulate Formula One, there is now a discipline for F1 esports, which is huge, almost as big in terms of its following as the actual Formula One now.
Yeah, and it's streamed on the Formula One fan page, so they just get tons of views from, I imagine there's actually quite a few Formula One fans who, oh, what's this F1 esports? And then they'll pick up the game and get into it like that as well, and then vice versa, there will be fans of the game who might actually start following Formula One itself.
So now you are in the same team as Robert Kubica and George Russell at race weekends as an esports driver. How many times this season have you pinched yourself trying to figure out if this is a dream or not? Seriously?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was lucky enough to go to the Formula One testing at Catalonia in March, and I met George and Robert there, and then again at the British GP at Silverstone in July. So that was an unreal experience, and actually just wandering around the hospitality, in my esports clothes, and they're there just chilling in between sessions, and it's like, I'm part of the same team here.
You're a celebrity now. Yeah, you are actually a celebrity now. In
they
a
get
way.
a lot more photos in their faces, but cameras in their faces. But it's actually amazing to actually have gone from a game to joining this esports team and actually being really close to Formula One personnel and the team and that whole production.
And we're in the middle of the F1 esports season at the moment. The third pro draft, I think, is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, or is it the fourth one now?
I haven't kept count, but I don't know.
The next round is soon.
Sounds about right, yeah.
You've got to go down to Gfinity at some point in the next couple of weeks and go racing.
Yeah.
It must be incredible to think that now, you're actually on a tight schedule where you have to do, a regimented amount of training for each round. You've got to obviously do the testing in a very similar sort of manner as the actual race team. What's it like working within an esports race team at that level? Because, of course, you've obviously raced for several teams in the past doing various different leagues and things, and from what I understand, a lot of those teams are little more than maybe a Facebook or WhatsApp group chatting away and discussing setups and race liveries and whatever. Things are so different now that we're in F1 esports at the level it's at.
Yeah, so I'm obviously a Williams esports driver for Gran Turismo, but I talk with and I'm friends are with the Formula One drivers for Williams esports, and I know we have an esports lounge at the factory. They invite the esports drivers down to the lounge for a couple of days before the first the first selection of I can't think of the word.
Pro draft.
Pro draft. Yes.
Pro draft. That's the one.
That's it.
We got there in the end.
Yes, pro draft. Just for training, just so all the team can be together, train together on the simulators, which the exact same ones we use at the pro draft or the competition. So yeah, they take it really seriously now, and it just shows that they invite the drivers from different countries to actually practice together in the same room.
So you work with the Williams esports team, you're racing in Gran Turismo Sport in a multitude of competitions at a massive level now. Considering that we're at a period where the ADAC out in Germany has now officially recognized esports as a professional form of motorsport, just how far do you think we are, first of all, before every motorsport community governing body recognizes it as an esport? How long do you think it's going to be before Britain decides to go for that?
Good question. I think, like we said earlier, sim racing has really taken off the past few years. It's the fastest growing part of the esports industry. So I'd say no more than a couple of years. If we look at the FIA Motorsport Games, which are going on this weekend in Rome. No, they've invited drivers from as many countries as possible to race against each other and represent esports. And that's the FIA, the governing body of Formula One. So it's only going to be a couple of years until every country really takes note of it and says, this is sim racing is going in place. Let's look at it properly and actually maybe invest in it as well.
The other question I wanted to ask is, a few years ago when Nissan had their GT Academy program, a couple of young drivers came through that, Lucas Ordóñez, and notably Jan Mardenborough, who for a while was working through the ranks of single-seaters and was even in GP3 at one stage,
yes.
So only a couple of steps away from Formula One. How many years do you think it's going to be then before we might see an esports driver work their way up the ladder in single-seaters and then eventually end up in Formula One? Is that a genuine viability coming soon?
But it very well could be, yeah. I mean, James Baldwin won World Fastest Gamer last week. He's going to be in a GT3 car, I believe, or GT4 for Aston Martin. So, you're talking about real big disciplines here. As you said, Jan was in GP3. He's now doing Super GT, which is the same championship Jenson Button is currently racing in. Some people have huge potential, and I think it's only going to be, I wouldn't say the next few years, but maybe the next 5 years until, I think people start knocking on the door of Formula 2, maybe even Formula 1 through esports. And I think with F1 esports taking off as well, I think that's a really big, it very well could happen, yeah.
Now, you and I, we've both grown up with games in our bedrooms on the consoles, and we've seen how the evolution of the games have come through, going back to the original Formula One from Psygnosis in '96, all the way to the TOCA touring car platforms that we still try and wipe the dust off and still muck about with. And it's been an accelerating pace how in the last sort of 20 years, we've gone from those sort of really fun games that people can just dip into and muck about with, where now every single racing title that comes onto the market has to be trying to compete with the Forza Motorsports and the Gran Turismos out there. And how fast is that development coming when you look at the various software paths that are out there? You look at things like iRacing, you look at Race Room, you look at Assetto Corsa. All these developers are trying to outbid and outdo each other. Is it going to be a very similar sort of war there to what we see in the real world of Formula One, in the likes of sort of F1, NASCAR, GTs? Is it a similar sort of battlefield in a way?
I think you're right, yeah. I know some of the technology used to actually develop these games nowadays, and it's absolutely crazy. I was only talking to the Gran Turismo track surface designer the other day, and he was mentioning...
There's actually a track surface designer in that?
Yes.
That's an amazing job.
So he was talking about laser scanning
right.
of the racetracks, and he said a couple of years ago they were within 10 centimeters accuracy, all the bumps replicated. But now they use like laser scanning, and they're within less than a millimeter accuracy. So the track you drive in the game is pretty much bang on to real life. Every bump, every little bit of curbing, it's exactly like in real life. And every game really has to now get to that accuracy. Otherwise, it's you won't get very good reviews. People going, oh, that curbs out by a meter or something, and it's we're very picky, as you know, with some of these games. It's like, oh, we can't have some of these corners being like that. It's a bit so. It's exciting to see where it's going to be. It's hard to see how much it's going to change in the next few years, because it's already really good. I mean, you can throw a real racing driver into iRacing, and they will drive it just like they would a real racing car. People like Max Verstappen, Lando Norris currently do iRacing. That
was my next topic of conversation. I mean, that must be fairly satisfying. I mean, when you look at things like Gran Turismo and iRacing, I was watching a few weeks ago, and obviously in one of the Pro Series races, Juan Pablo Montoya came in.
Yes.
and was racing. Were you racing against him in that race?
I wasn't actually in that race, but
you weren't in that race?
he was present. Yeah, and that was.
And when it's people like him, you know, that you watched when you were a kid on Formula One on television, and he's embracing this, and you've got people like Verstappen and Norris and Rubens Barrichello's boy Eduardo's come in, so now he's dragged Dad into the world.
Yeah.
So that must be another dimension. It's one thing when it's all you competitive gamers who have grown up in that world and are all, you know each other and have raced each other week in, week out. But when you get people like Montoya coming in and Verstappen and Norris coming in, I mean, that must take things to a different level.
Yeah, I've not competed against any of them actually in person, but you know, to say these some of the best drivers in the world are actually racing on these games, which you can race on as well. It's actually surreal, you know, when you see their name pop up in the server, you know, thinking, hang on, I recognise that name.
It can't be too long before Lewis comes, because doesn't he have he has an affiliation with Gran Turismo Sport?
Yes, so he's the Gran Turismo Maestro, so he provides feedback for physics and things like that. He actually has, I believe, 24 cockpits in his California home, all set up with Gran Turismo, and he invites his mates around to have a blast on the game. That's what I've heard. And he actually has a PSN as well. We don't know it, but he does race online, so you might have raced against him, I might have raced against him.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
he has a code name?
Yes.
Oh, if anybody could find out what that code name is. Who is Lewis Hamilton online? I mean, it's wonderful, isn't it? Because it kind of bridges the gap. I mean, I remember when I first got into sim racing and online gaming, and the title of choice in the Formula One paddock as well as in the PCs at home was Grand Prix 2. Mm-hmm. Jeff Crammond's, which is, well, you know, anybody who's into sim racing loves it. It works on my current gaming PC. You're welcome to come over. And it's wonderful how, you know, there is such an incredible link, and there's always been that incredible link between being able to run the sims and, you know, test on the racetrack, especially now that Formula One has decreased testing. So actually, the platform of esports and sim racing and simulator racing in general has actually become far more prevalent now that there's testing cuts and cost caps, and the cost of racing on the track and testing on the track has gone up. Mm-hmm. It's basically given esports the perfect platform to come in and take over that market. Yeah,
I know Formula One teams invest millions of pounds into their what do you call it? The simulators. Yes, the simulators. I've actually seen the Williams simulator in person, and that thing is crazy. The amount of I don't know the technical side of it because it blew my mind when the guy was explaining it to me. But you know, the thing, they put so many millions of pounds into it because, as you said, they're cutting testing. I think for 2021 they're cutting it even more. They're cutting all the in-season testing, so they have to make sure that their drivers can get as much running time in the simulators to perform best when they get to the race weekends.
So, the next question, obviously the talk is where real life and digital sports meet. You're one of the stars of the circuit in the virtual world. When are we going to see you in the real world of motorsport? Have you been thinking about that now?
It's a bit too much money for me to dive into it, I think. But, you know, if any esports competition gets me closer to a race seat, that's what I'll be gunning for. I know Igor Fraga, who won the Gran Turismo Championships last year, he's in a joint partnership with McLaren Shadow and Gran Turismo, racing in Formula 3 regional at the minute this year, and he finished third in the championship.
Yeah, he won races.
Oh yeah, he won. I think got 2 wins at Monza in the wet a couple of weekends ago. And he was like something like more than 15 seconds in the lead. And this is a guy, okay, he's had some experience in Brazil with Indy Lights and things like that, but you know, I race against him on Gran Turismo every month or so, and I think there's quite a few of us who could jump in a car and after a bit of practice, you know, could get close to some top times. But it's given that opportunity to, as esports drivers, which is crucial to actually get us into get his practice into a real racing seat.
So now we're in a very interesting time in the motoring industry where everything is starting to become a little bit more electric based, legislation's going up. There's a chance you won't be buying a car one day, you might well be leasing one through the Zip car, whatever that's going to be. Do you think there might be a bit of a tipping point when esports motorsport actually becomes more viable than the real thing? Is there ever a likelihood of that potentially happening?
I hope not.
Me neither, but it is worrying considering how quickly it's going. It could go that way.
It could, yeah. Yeah, I've been in some electric cars and they are rapid. I mean, it's but no, I prefer the classic combustion engine, to be honest. Yeah, that's just my preference.
Fair enough. So the way that Gran Turismo has evolved and suddenly become this massive industry, I mean, you are now traveling to places like Tokyo, to Monte Carlo, to all of these incredible places where the venue is going. When is the next step? Because I'm guessing Gran Turismo has always been, you know, the innovator that it's been. There's got to be more coming. So what happens next? What's the next evolutionary step? Where do you go next?
I'm unsure, to be honest. I mean, I've been a bit sport this year. I've been to, like you said, Tokyo, I've been to Austria, New York, Germany, Paris, just playing a game for a couple of days.
How worn out is your passport, by the way?
Yeah, Gran Turismo offer an experience, more so than like prize money like iRacing would. They kind of want to offer drivers an experience going around to these places, and there won't be any prize as such apart from a nice trophy and maybe a Tag Heuer watch, who are one of the partners. But you know, they're ferrying us around the world. I've heard of some of the plans for next year about where we might be going all over the world. But I think it's important to focus on all the other areas for that competition. So, you know, tournament structures and maybe offer opportunities, like we said, into the real world, real life experiences.
So for those who are looking to get into it or thinking about getting into it, what would you recommend, having been, you know, like me, the kind of person who's had wheel and pedals, you know, sellotaped to desks and then obviously upgraded to the big stuff? What's the best entry level from your point of view? You know, if you would recommend someone to get started in the sport as a box standard, what would you advise?
I mean, I'm going to be a bit biased here and say buy a PlayStation and Gran Turismo,
But I guess also because it's a very easy way of getting in.
It's very accessible, yeah. You don't have to buy a wheel straight away. I mean, I played on a controller for 18 years of my life, and then when I realised I was pretty quick, you know, jump into a wheel, buy yourself a wheel. You can get one from as little as £100, but you can spend thousands. Just jump into it, you know. If you want to take it seriously, continuously compare yourself against the top guys. It's the only way you're going to get quicker. Join some private leagues, like I did. You don't have to enter the really scary stuff straight away because it might be a bit of your
Which I have tried and it doesn't work. Very embarrassing moment.
Yeah. So yeah, just, you know, you've got to put the hours in as well. You know, some weeks I'm putting in a couple of hours a day on average to actually get to the top times, even myself, you know. So, but it pays off in the end. So, but yeah, I'd advise anyone just to jump in and put the hours in. And if you enjoy it as well, like I do, then it makes it that much easier to actually get better.
The other thing as well is that, you know, we talk a lot about software, but hardware is actually quite an important element of it as well. So for people who are starting to get into it again, what makes a good rig? Because I've seen so many different types of rigs. I've seen ones that are stationary, that move around, that, you know, don't stay in one place, that filter out of this. What would you recommend?
I think stability in something which is rigid is important, something which doesn't move around. I mean, I said earlier I had a kitchen cupboard with an IKEA chair which was moved in.
Was it one on wheels? Oh, no.
No, not on wheels.
Because I've done that as well.
No, not on wheels. But, you know, that was really uncomfy. But I used that to qualify for GT Academy even in 2013. And only this year, Williams Esports got me a Playseat Sensation Pro, which, you know, is complete opposite end of the market. But you don't have to spend thousands of pounds. You can get pretty cheap stands for maybe £100. I think some of it comes down to personal preference and fit, but talking about wheels, I mean, there's quite a few companies, Trustmaster, Fanatec, the more money you put in, obviously, the better you're going to get out of it. But I think making the jump from a controller to wheel, I think, is the most crucial step. So I wouldn't say spend thousands of pounds straight away, or even 500, 600 pounds. You know, you can get a decent wheel for 200, 300 pounds just to start out on.
Now, you tend to find, or at least I've observed over the last sort of 5-6 years, there are some drivers that will prefer one simulator over a different one. So, like for yourself, obviously racing in GT Sports, but there are some drivers who will prefer to be only on R-Factor 2, only on Assetto Corsa, only on iRacing. Do you think that there's an advantage to trying to be as diverse across different sims as humanly possible, or is it quite hard to be at the front end of everything?
Yeah, I think it's quite hard to be at the front end of everything. We've seen James Baldwin, who's won World Fastest Gamer. He tries to jump into Gran Turismo Sport every now and again, and I think just driving with so many different physics engines all the time, it's hard to actually get accustomed to one properly. So I think if you're trying to get to the top times, focus on one of them. But I've raced pretty much everything over the years, you know, Assetto Corsa, project cars, iRacing. I think it's good to experience them all just to see where your preferences lie. I always come back to Gran Turismo for me. It's just, you've always got that Gran Turismo feel, and the graphics are stunning. But, you know, I really enjoy Assetto Corsa, just for hot lapping. It's just, the actual feel of the physics is just absolutely awesome. But, yeah, it's important to, you know, try a bunch of them.
Fantastic. I'm aware that we're getting short on time, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be really interested to hear if anybody has a particular question for Adam. Well, we'll be happy. Yes, we have a couple of questions. Gentleman at the front. We'll get our runner with our microphone over. Yeah.
I'd be interested to understand if you've experienced a proper F1 simulator against a high-end gaming rig. How much difference is there from your perspective with the experience that you've got?
From a high-end F1 simulator to a game you can buy? Yeah. I've not tried an F1 simulator, so I wouldn't actually know. But I mean, games are getting much better nowadays to replicate real-life physics. And we touched on some of the competitions which have got people from the game into motorsport. So Jan Marden was currently racing in Super GT, and he went through Gran Turismo in 2011. So that was Gran Turismo 5. And if you play that game now, you'll see actually how far away the driving physics were from real life. Gran Turismo Sport, now in 2017, and now 2019, has got the physics even closer to real life. So I think iRacing and Assetto Corsa probably do it best at the minute if you want to get as close to a simulator as possible. I've not played the F1 game actually, so I won't be able to.
Sorry, you've never played the F1 game?
Not the current one. Not the current one.
Not the current one, 2019, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to wander over to the Downforce radio stand, it's there, it's ready. You can have a go if you want.
I haven't had the time, actually, recently. But,
it's doable.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting really close, so it's not far. I wouldn't say it's far off, but, you know, Formula 1 teams put millions of pounds into it, so it's got to be better, surely.
Fair enough. Who is the current Williams eSport simulator driver? Who is the current
that's
Williams
a question.
It's not Nicholas Latifi or someone like that, is it? He's their
it
reserve.
Is Latifi, because last year it was the guy
Put him on the
Formula
spot now.
E, the Nissan drivers for Formula E. What's his name?
Oh, he's a Formula E driver as well. Oh,
No,
Oliver Rowland.
He was Rowland, yes.
Oliver
He was
Rowland.
Rowland last year when I went to see him.
I've heard he's allergic to shellfish. So if you just quickly slip some on his plate when he's about to go in the simulator, they'll call on you. It'll be all right. We'll get you in there. Any more questions? Yes. It's up to the right here.
When you approach real drivers who obviously do it out on the track, how do you find their attitudes are towards sim drivers? Because as a sim racer myself, I sometimes meet drivers and then it's a little bit, oh, I'm just a sim racer. So where some people go, oh, it's just a game, it's not real. So how has your experience with drivers' attitudes been towards that, and is it changing?
That's a good question.
Very good
Are
question.
they starting to take it seriously now?
Definitely, yeah. I'd say a few years ago, you know, people would say, oh, yeah, you know, I'd say I'm a Williams Esports driver, and they go, oh, right, cool. And then you say, you know, something like Gran Turismo or RS, and they, oh, you mean the game and not, you know, the real track. So people are changing their mindsets over that, and you know, we've got drivers like Max Verstappen and Lando Norris coming into sim racing, or they started off in sim racing actually, but the word will soon spread, you know. It's getting, like I said, it's changing, and people have to recognise it because it's getting so big now. And it'll get to a point where people will be saying, oh, you're an esports driver, and they might actually be more interested in the esports side of things than the, you know, the real stuff. I think so anyway.
There might be a rather awkward moment one day when you and George Russell are sat at table and someone will go, oh, that's Adam Suswillo. Adam Suswillo. It could happen, you know, it could get to the point, because we're in such a digital age, you know, where there could actually end up being more interest in the gaming side of it than the real world of racing.
Yeah, and maybe because it'll be more accessible to them. You know, everyone can watch Formula 1 on TV and go, oh, look, they're a Formula 1 driver, but actually, you know, if you see an esports driver, they can go over a chat with him.
That one.
Yeah, I can maybe get into your sport. So, yeah, we'll see.
Fair enough. Any more questions from anyone? Anyone else have anything? I have one more to close up, actually, and this is an interesting one in terms of where the future of gaming lies. Let's say that, you know, we fast forward 10 years and we head into the 2030 season. Do you think that there is going to be as much of a culture, well, how's the best way to phrase this? The esports world is gaining massively in terms of its progression. Do you feel that there are going to be dedicated, you know, sort of channels and opportunities for, you know, is esports going to be its own entity in the same way that racing currently is now? Do you think that the industry could actually overtake it in terms of, you know, more people will be competing in that than there will be in car racing?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, if you look how big esports competitions outside of sim racing are, you know, things like Fortnite and stuff, I mean, they're offering millions of pounds to winners, and so
Fortnite, that's 2 weeks from now, is it? What is it? Am I uneducated? I don't understand. What is this Fortnite?
It's some massive game.
Oh, okay.
It's not sim racing, but
okay,
my point was, you know, if there's that much money involved, it's only going to get to a point where there's massive sponsors coming in to actually make that possible. You know, maybe it's on TV and. Well, it's on TV now. I watched Rocket League on TV the other day. So I think that's definitely possible, yeah, and it's actually exciting to see where it's going to be.
One of the next steps I'd like to see, at F1 circuits, you tend to see an awful lot of celebrities coming in, like Will Smith and Daniel Craig and all these people come to the race circuits. Now, they can't just jump into a Formula 1 car, but they might be able to compete in F1 esports. There's an idea, do you not think? A celebrity, a real celebrity, F1 esports race, maybe.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
We'll get a few people in for that.
Yeah. I'll let you keep that idea.
Yeah, well, you get your network, I'll get mine, and we'll get it sorted. Last opportunity for any questions. Anybody want to ask something? Okay, I think we're going to wrap. You're going to have a nice early bath. As I said, there is F1 2019 over there. If you want to sample it, just give us a note. It's no problem. So a massive thank you, Adam Suswillo, GT Sport and Williams Esports driver. Thank you very much for talking to us, and enjoy the rest of the season. Thank you very much. Thank you.